Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Horror Countdown podcast. I'm your host, Don Anelli, and today I have a special guest with me from behind the screams. Please welcome Holly.
Hello. It's Beyond the Screams.
Oh, Beyond the Screams?
Yeah.
I get that
No, it's okay.
I get that confused because there's a show I listen to called Behind the Screams, and I've gotten you guys confused so many times. Okay,
That's
so
perfectly fine.
yeah, so okay, from Beyond the Screams. I'm sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
Mhm. All right. So, well, thank you for being here. It's fun to talk with, finally get to do something together.
Yeah, I'm so excited to finally talk with you and get a chance to meet you because yeah, you're a huge supporter of podcasts on that I see you networking with, and you're just such a wonderful person to give credit to all these podcasts and like shout out and everything. And it's just really nice to have that support. So I'm really excited to do this with you.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it's great to give back and share the community.
Yeah.
So for today, that brings us to the topic we're going to be talking about tonight. So we're going to be doing top 10 novel adaptations. So let's give a little bit of a reasoning here for our chosen topic.
Yeah. So the way that I went about making my list, I set up some rules for myself.
Okay,
So
good. So did I.
yeah, good, good, good. So I had to have, of course, read the novel, the original text, and seen the movie so I can have a good comparison. Um, and my list is because there are some movies on my list that are like in my top horror movie list. I had to really take a look at it and see if it's a good adaptation versus, whether I like the movie or not.
So a good
So,
movie versus a good adaptation.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, so my list, I'm not quite as in depth as you. Most of these, to be honest, I've never actually read them,
Hmm.
but my adaptation was is that it had to be a full-length novel. I couldn't do a short story adaptation.
Okay. All right.
So that was my criteria. So I went that it had to, one, be a good movie, and two, it had to be a full-length novel that it was based on. It wasn't a shorter adaptation.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So if we're ready, let's get it
Yeah. We're going from like 10 to 1, right? We're
correct.
gonna count
Yeah.
down. All right.
Yeah, that's the way we go.
All right. So my number 10 is Hellraiser, which is based on The Hellbound Heart by Clive Barker.
Nice. Yeah, that was a contender until I remember it was a novella.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that doesn't fit with
So
yours.
it doesn't fit yours, but
Um,
it was a short list until I made the consideration. So I'm a
yeah,
huge fan.
yeah, it is on mine. I didn't have that distinction, and Hellraiser is one of my favorite movies, but it is lower on my list because yeah, it's a short story and um there's a lot of leeway you can take with the overall story, like filling in the story from page to movie. So there's because it's a short story, there's just so much that's filled in within the movie itself that's like, yeah, it has the general essence of the story, but it's not really the story on screen.
Yeah. I I I do admit this is one I haven't really read in depth, but I have read it once. So I do know that
Hmm.
there is a huge amount of disparity between the book and the story.
Hmm.
Um, to give a slight spoiler for those of you that aren't familiar with it, the addition of Pinhead and the Cenobites.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's one of the the big differences between the two because I don't remember if they gave him a full-on description, but they just called him head priest, correct?
Yes. And in the novella, it was more of like the pins that you see in the movie are more like kind of nails in his head, but in the book they're kind of, or in the novella, they're more described as like these um almost sewing pins with like flat jewel heads that are like
Mm.
all the way in. So, and because of the description of that and how they tried to do it, they were like, yeah, it doesn't really come across on screen the way they wanted to. So they needed to make it a little more like
Obvious
visceral. Yeah.
or
Yeah.
obvious visceral.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, Behind the Monsters on Shudder, they have a new series where they're going through like all the classic monsters and like how they're being made. The last one that I watched was on Pinhead, and it was really
Oh,
interesting.
yeah.
They had,
He's the next one on my list at the time of recording this.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I wish I would have gotten to it, but because yeah, he's the next. That's the next episode on my on
amazing. Yeah,
the time of recording this. It's my next episode.
nice.
So yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm a huge fan of it. It was a short list on my list until I remember I made the distinction to separate full length from short story slash novella. So that
Yeah,
kind of knocked him off, but I would have had it on there. I'm a huge fan of it. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And there are so many, like Clive Barker is one of my favorite horror authors, and there are so many short stories. If you've read any of the books of blood, there are so many stories in there. I know Rawhead Rex was turned into a movie. It wasn't really that great because I feel like Clive Barker is almost um like Stephen
well,
King, where like sometimes like the way he describes things you can't really put on screen, or like an HP
yeah.
Lovecraft. It's like
If
yeah.
if I recall correctly, the essence is just the monster running amok. I think that's the basic
Yeah.
essence. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if I remember, if I because I did read that one. I think that's the big discrepancy between them is that it's the general essence of the monster running amok in the community.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying I'm trying to think if there was like maybe one or two others that were adapted from that Books of Blood thing that I can't remember any others. I
You
remember
know,
Rawhead Rex was one.
I think I don't remember. I had to be 2 years ago, 2019, where they had a Books of Blood on Hulu. It really wasn't that great. I was very excited for it because
Oh
I
yeah,
was
I had that on my worst of the year list.
yeah, I was super
Yeah,
excited because I was like, okay, maybe they can break these up in a nice way to actually give credence to these stories and like go into the emotional depth that they deserve, but it really didn't. And I was like, all
yeah.
right, you guys don't know Clive Barker.
Yeah, I think they actually, I don't know if it's actually an adaptation of a specific story, but there was a film from like 2009 or 10 that used Books of Blood.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't,
It was
it
was
was
it the
the,
Masters of Horror?
no, it was a standalone movie.
Okay.
If I remember the basic plot line right, because it's been years since I've seen it, basically, this guy arrives at this remote motel and weird stuff starts happening and it turns out that the stranger is a conduit for demons to enter the world. He's like a
Okay.
traveling conduit, and then the Books of Blood is basically the fact that the demons write their spells on him,
Yeah.
and then that's how they enter the world, is that writing their spells on him gives them the power to enter the world. And
Okay.
then it's a
Yeah.
race to stop them. And I don't recall specifically because again it's been years, but I
Hmm.
remember that as the general gist of the story.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't know if that one is based on anything specific from one of the stories because I haven't read all of them in that.
That sounds like yeah, like kind of there's one that's like the opening story, and they usually
Okay.
use that as the kind of wraparound.
Okay, yeah, I
Yeah.
don't recall if that was a specific story in that book, but yeah, that I remember that movie specifically. So
Okay.
yeah. All right. Well, that's a great first choice.
All right. Yeah. Number nine, I have a lot of Stephen King on this list. And the
Oh,
first, yeah, first one is number nine. It's Carrie.
well, spoiler, that one made mine.
Yay!
Yeah, I haven't made mine.
All right,
So
awesome.
I'll discuss that more in depth when I get to mine.
Okay, all right.
But
Do you want me
yeah,
to go? Do you want me to discuss with you? I can keep going
I mean, if
through
you
my
want to do it
list.
now, or if you want to talk about
No,
it when it's my turn.
let's go through my list then.
Okay, yeah,
All right. My number 8 is Rosemary's Baby.
that's another one on my list.
Awesome. Okay, well, I'll talk about this one now then,
Okay.
because Rosemary's Baby is my number one horror movie. It's been my top number one horror movie for probably like 15 years or so.
Hmm.
And I don't think I read the book until maybe 10 years ago or so. And it was one where when I read it, I was reading it and I was like, oh, this movie makes a lot more sense now. And that's one of the things that I took in consideration into writing this list because Rosemary's Baby is my favorite horror movie. However, I did have to read the book to understand like the deeper meanings that was going on behind everything and the many layers that was happening. But God, man, that movie, it just gets under my skin every single time I watch it.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when I first saw it, I didn't think much of it. I thought it was maybe like 10 minutes too long or
Mhm.
just a little slower pace, but I gave it a rewatch on a recommendation of a friend of mine who told me a little bit about it, and I wish I remembered why wish I remember the specific point about it, but I watched it on his recommendation, and I really grew to love it afterwards. I really think it's one of the better films from that period. uh, I do appreciate a lot of the relationship dynamics within it. I think it's a really
Mhm.
fun angle that it mixes that in with, pregnancy and, mother's growing, attachment to her child. And then you mix that in with this satanic cult angle. It's a great time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like I loved this movie before because I'm just drawn to psychological horror movies in general. Like that's my draw. But once I was pregnant with my first child and going through all that, and then I watched this movie, I was like, oh my God, I totally understand this on a
Mhm.
deeper like I totally get it on just like a different level. And it's I hate to say it sounds so cliche, but becoming a mother has definitely shaped the way that I watch horror movies and the way that I feel watching horror movies. Like just a lot of them that I have on my every year watch list. Like this is my Halloween list. This is my winter list. I'm like, ooh, do I want to watch this one this year? It's hitting a little too close to home now.
Yeah. Yeah, I know the feeling. I've gotten that way sometimes where it's like, do I really want to watch this for the 50th time or do I want to watch something new? And then it's like you're having that eternal battle in your head. And
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, I've gotten that way too. It's like,
Yep.
you want to honor the season, you want to honor the holiday, but then it's like,
Hmm.
oh, but this one looks so good. I've never seen it before.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
I get that way a lot.
Yeah.
I think you're number 6.
7.
Oh, wait,
Uh,
yeah, 7.
Number 7, my movie pick is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, the one with Robert De Niro.
Ooh, I picked the original.
Okay, okay, yes. Okay,
Okay.
because Frankenstein is my favorite overall horror story. And all right, this is really cheesy, but I named my firstborn after Victor Frankenstein. His name is Victor. But I don't know, there's just something very sad and human about that story. And even though this is why I put it a little lower on my list, even though it's called Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, it's still not the true adaptation of what she wrote. It takes some liberties.
Yeah.
And but even still, it really holds the emotion and the heart that you feel when you read the story. And what was translated into the original, which what you have, um, the just the sadness and the weight that it brings. I think that's what translates through it. But Mary Shelley's version, like the Mary, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
not
the
her version.
94 version, the
Yeah,
94 version.
Kenneth Branagh's version of it. It just I feel like it um translates page to screen very well. Different the page to screen adaptation, it really holds true to the emotional story that it has, and that's the more true version for me of why I've picked that version rather than the like Universal monster movie.
Yeah. I do agree. I do think from like I said, from what I've read of the Mary Shelley the novel, I do think the 94 version is closer than the Universal version. I know some of that would probably have been counted down to the censorship at the time, so it's not like
Absolutely.
I'm really not
Yeah.
gonna like fault it for not being a faithful adaptation. But yeah, I do remember reading that the Mary Shelley version is much more accurate and it's much more faithful. I think it's because the second half is the monster's journey
Yes.
because it
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's more I think in line with what she went which where she went with it because now he's loose, he's out, he's, exploring the world for his first time and the abandonment and the rejection he goes through from Victor to, you know, wanting to leave him behind and start on with his life and then all of a sudden coming back and wanting to be embraced and accepted.
Mm-hmm.
I remember reading that that was a lot more in line with what she went through. So
Yeah, yeah, and
yeah,
seeing the Universal version, that you get that too. And that's what really drew me into Frankenstein as a
yeah,
character, is that emotion and that sadness that she wrote is very much carried through in that original Universal
uh-huh,
film. And it's so sad. And you just like, he's the most sympathetic character, and it
yeah,
translates so very well. And the Mary Shelley version, the 94 one, it's it just gives a little more, it gets past that like early Universal stage of like needs to be flashy and like get people invested and involved and everything. And it plays to human emotion, and I
yeah.
love it.
Well, my problem with that is the fact that I find that far more attractive in Bride than I do in the original.
Oh yeah,
So
that is
that's
true.
so yeah, that's kind of my problem. So
Okay.
yeah,
I
it's not
can
a
appreciate that. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, great choice. As for that version, I do like it. It's been a while since I've revisited, so I'm not 100% familiar, but I do
Mhm.
remember a lot of what you're saying, and it is coming kind of ringing a lot of circles. So
Yeah.
yeah, fantastic choice.
So my number 6 is another short novella. It's from Stephen King. It's The Mist.
That one would have been mine if I would have included
Ah,
it.
yeah, if
Yeah,
yeah.
if I would have included that thing, that would have been one of mine because
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan. That's probably actually my
Oh
favorite.
man.
That's probably my favorite actual King adaptation.
Yeah, it is. Um, I have okay, so some of these people may have consider me cheating a bit, but I listen to a lot of audiobooks because I used to like drive like half an hour, drop off my kids, go to work and everything. So it's like always audiobooks, audiobooks, audiobooks. So I listened to the audio version of The Mist, and it just sent chills up my spine, like all the descriptions that they had. And I thought they did such a great job, even though it was all CGI, or you know, it's almost like, okay, come on, we can see that it's like fake and everything. It's still the it's the human connections and the human emotion, and like the my favorite character in the movie and the book, Miss Carmody, Marcia Gay Harden, she's so like engaging, and you want to watch her, but it's like, oh my god, you're just a horrible human being. And it's, but the fact that she is so engaging, it's, I don't know, it just pulls me into that story. And I
Yeah.
think the text to screen works very, very well on that human level.
Yeah, I completely agree. A lot, I find myself frightened of that because a lot of what she says I would probably believe.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of her reasoning and a lot of her arguments are actually far more sound than just hysterical ranting.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's the part that kind of gets to me is that yeah, I would probably be one that would look at her with skepticism, but there's that part of me that's like, she's making more sense than you want her to.
Yeah, because it's like,
That
look what's happening. She's the one
exactly,
who's making sense right now with all
yeah.
the crazy things that are happening.
Yeah, like I said,
Yeah.
her her logic and her reasoning is not as far crazed as the situation around her. The
Yeah.
points
And
she's making are very reasonable, and that's I can very easily see human society the way it is now following her quite.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's no doubt in
Yeah.
my mind a lot of people are going to follow her.
Yeah. Yeah. And just like the differences and the ending. I won't say anything just in case nobody
Yeah,
has,
yeah,
one or the
that's
other, but different endings, and both of them are, they just hit hard.
yeah,
They hit hard. One slightly more than the other, but I don't mind the change in that, because visually it's almost like you see all these like fantastic things visually. So seeing something so visually heartbreaking fits with that tone. So it
yeah,
fits the movie versus the novella.
yeah, completely.
Yeah. But I do think that it's a beautiful adaptation, and it hits those like interpersonal relationships of like, what would you do if you're in this if you're in this small knit position where it's chaos? Like, what would you do? It's scary.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Um,
speaking of small scary places, Cujo is my next one.
mm. Yeah, I was considering it, but I had others
Mhm.
on my list, but
Okay.
I can respect it.
Okay, yeah, because I this was one that I listened to the audiobook. I was not really a fan of the person who read the audio story, but they still gave a very intense reading of what it would be like to be in that main character's position. And I think that the movie compared with that, it's like they kept that tension like just right on par with each other. Because yeah, like watching that movie, I'm just always like, god, like, is this dog gonna hurt them? Like, like, oh man, I don't,
Yeah,
I'm rooting for them, but I really have no faith that they're gonna get anywhere. It's
mhm.
just really sad.
Yeah,
It's sad and scary.
yeah. I'm a huge fan of that section of the film. Not as much the first half. A lot of the relationship stuff a little gets to me,
Yeah.
but yeah, I completely agree. I love the way that they filmed the way that the dog patrols the car. I mean, you know, you're trying to prevent the dog from getting to your kid. Like you want the kid to survive, and I think that's like the main thing, especially with you and your connection with your kids. You know, I would imagine that would be a
Hmm.
very, even if you've not like subconsciously realized it, I would imagine that would be a very strong factor to a connection factor with you.
Absolutely. Yeah, cuz I do think that I listened to the audiobook of this before I had kids. And even then it was like, God, yeah, like what would I do? Like what lengths would I go to? And just almost the ridiculousness of the situation of like, I'm stuck in a car with my kid while there's a dog outside. Like when you say it, it's almost like,
Yeah,
God, this is really ridiculous, but I can't escape it. And
right.
there are so many moments in your life where it's like when you say it out loud, it's like, this sounds so stupid, but it's really impacting my life. And
Yeah.
I really, even in the story, like when she's going through all the issues with her husband, who she's getting a divorce and everything, it's like, yeah, all these issues just seem so superficial and stupid, but they are important. And same thing when it comes to being faced with a dog who has rabies. Like, this shouldn't be a thing. This is kind of dumb for me in this modern life for me to be going through, but I'm now stuck in a car with my kid. How do I protect my kid?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a big part, like I said, of what I like about it. I think the way that that's handled is fantastic. I love it. But
Yeah, yeah. And Dee
yeah,
Wallace, like,
yeah.
who cannot love her?
Yeah. I mean, that definitely helps as well. So,
Yeah.
all right. Yeah, great choice. Number five or four?
I'm on three.
Oh, three. Wow.
Three. Yeah, we're
Okay.
just racing through it. Um, Number three is The Girl Next Door, a same novel by Jack Ketchum. Have you
Oh,
seen this?
I don't think I have.
Okay. Let me I'll give a little explanation. So it starts out, excuse me, starts out with this man who like witnesses some kind of accident, and then he just starts reliving things from his childhood. So it's this older man's point of view from um, memories that he's had in his childhood.
Hmm.
And un- it's okay. Jack Ketchum is such a visceral writer. He is the only person who I have read a book where I've like literally thrown it across the room and said, nope, can't handle it right now. um, it's his horror writing is, I wouldn't say psychological, it's just very human. It's just all the things that you think are bad as a, like, if you're like growing up and you feel shame, it's like you feel shame as a person for this reason or another. It's that he like just builds upon shame and like all of these non-discussed things, and ultimately it's about a story about a girl who is two girls who are being abused and people who do nothing about it.
Hmm.
And whether or not it's, you know, they either do nothing about it because they don't want to or because they don't know what to do. And that's really kind of the scary thing. It's that this is these are things that are happening to kids, that it's like, oh my God, they don't know what to make of this. And there are adults there that could prevent this from happening. And I think that the movie is a beautiful adaptation of it. It's very difficult to watch. It's a difficult book to read. Like I said,
Hmm.
as I was reading it, at one point I threw it across the room and I said, I was like, nope, can't read it right now. gonna come back to that in a few days. But I think ultimately, if you're a person who can look, like get past that and like look at it as the psychological horror that it is, it's just a great movie and a
Hmm.
beautiful adaptation of what was written.
I'll have to take a look out for it because I know Jack Ketchum. I think I've seen his I think I saw a film from his called Offspring.
Offspring is not the best of his.
Yeah,
I
I think
This
that's the
one,
I think that's the
yeah.
only one of his I think I've seen. That's what I'm
Okay.
saying. I know the name, but I think it's just from that.
Yeah, The Girl Next Door and the what is it? The Lost Ones? Yeah. That's the other one I have. The Lost Ones.
Hmm.
Those are my two like best. I didn't include that on this list because it doesn't stick out in my mind as much as The Girl Next Door, but um The Girl Next Door and The Lost Ones are the best story to screen adaptations. Um The Offspring, and there was another one that came after that, maybe a couple of years ago, that was like a sequel to The Offspring. They're not, the stories are good, but the movie adaptations are not that
Hmm.
great. I
Yeah.
highly recommend Jack Ketchum as more of a reading author than seeing his adaptations presented on screen.
Hmm.
Definitely read him because God, he will just put you in a mode and just like send that book sailing across the room and be like, no, I don't want to read that, but I want to read it.
All right. Yeah. Definitely we'll keep an eye out for that one.
Yeah.
So cool. Number two
Number two, another Stephen King is Misery.
on my list.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's one that goodness, that's just such a good one. And I listened to other horror review podcasts, and one that I listened to recently, the Nightlife, Knight Life. They reviewed Misery, and gosh, it's just such a good adaptation. And just the way that Stephen King writes Annie, and the way that Kathy Bates portrays her
Mm.
on screen, it's like she was new, and she did Annie and got an Academy Award. Like there's just something special there.
Yeah.
And that that tension that is in there, like the tension and just the awkwardness that Annie has in that story, it's like Kathy Bates just brings to the screen so well. And knowing that she was so new to acting, it's like, God, like, who are you?
Yeah. I mean, I'll say that in mind. That's a lot of my fascination with the film is it's impossible just not to fall for.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just even though what happens is it just gradually becomes much more terrifying,
Mm-hmm.
you're still there. You're still with her. And, much like with what we were saying with The Mist, you almost side for her.
Yeah. Yeah. Like her, just even the simple things where she's like mispronouncing the champagne, and she's like Don Perignon. It's like, oh, look at, like, you want so badly to have this idea that's in your head, and that's just not who you are. But I don't know. It's just this juxtaposition that just
Yeah.
makes her just, I don't know, just sad because of how hard she's trying, and just like the blinder she's willing to put on her while
Yeah.
she's doing all of this. And I think Kathy Bates just knocks it out of the park.
Mm.
She is so good. And
one of the few times I've actually agreed with the Academy Award nomination.
yeah, see, right? And God, just like when she's holding a hammer and she's like, God, I love you. It's like, oh my God, you're so scary and I love you.
Uh, all right, so your top choice.
All right. So this one took a couple days worth of like going through my list. And my absolute number one, I think that I have to say is The Silence of the Lambs.
Mm, uh, I was debating.
Yeah.
Hard to argue with that one.
Okay. Yeah, because that was again, like that's something that I just grew up watching. And I mean, I grew up watching just I saw an actor or an actress and I just wanted to consume everything that they were in and just see who they were as an actor. And that's how I came across a lot of horror, is because I saw a lot of people who were in horror. And so I was like, oh, let me see more of what you're in. I was like, oh, okay, you're in this horror thing. Let me see this. And when I learned that Jodie Foster was in Silence of the Lambs and I saw it, I was like, wow, it's just on a different caliber than what I thought horror was. And then, just, gosh, like the scene between Clarice and Hannibal, like when they're talking about like the lambs and everything, and she's having her moment, I would I would wake up when I was in high school. I would be getting ready for school and I would just put it on as I was like getting my lunch together, getting my backpack together. I would just put that scene on because I'm like, this is so beautiful. It's scary and it's emotional and it's beautiful. And that's what I love about horror. That's the pinnacle to me, is when something is so scary that you're so scared of it, but it's something that draws you to it, something that's beautiful, but it's something that scares you, but you're still, there's still something that draws you to it. It's like that comfort. And The Silence of the Lambs, like everything within it just makes that mix to me. Like they did such a good job making Clarice from page to screen, and I just appreciate it so much. And even though it wasn't the same going from Silence of the Lambs to Hannibal and like going all after that and everything, it's not the same. It still has that psychological element to it that I appreciate, and it's it holds a certain depth to it that I'm drawn to.
Yeah, that's kind of why I have it at number 10 for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I completely agree with all of that. To me, it's not so much about anything else. It's between the two of them.
Yes.
I think they
Yeah.
make the movie, and yeah, watching them go at it and realizing, the mind games that are going on, that,
Mm-hmm.
she's giving it just as good as he is, but even at that point, he's still two steps ahead.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, to me, that's one of my favorite things, is I love watching two people play mind games with each other.
Mm-hmm. And I love that this isn't really shown in the movie adaptations, but in the books, that like, she's here, he's two steps ahead. That is shown in the books way more than it is in the movie adaptations. And I still think that like even with Hannibal and Red Dragon and everything, I think they were fine adaptations.
Yeah.
It's you just can't really capture that tandemness, that like the
Yeah.
dance that they do.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost as much. I didn't even need to see any of Buffalo Bill.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't even need to see any of him, but then you bring him into the equation, and yeah,
I know, right? It's like, oh my
yeah,
God. It's like you have this amazing thing that's like this psychological dance,
yeah.
but then you have this other thing that's like, oh my God, this person is like, oh my
This,
God.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, you have a character
Yeah,
that's deranged, but
exactly.
he's not smart enough to
Yeah, yeah,
put it together.
exactly. It's like, who am I supposed to root for? Am I supposed to
Yeah,
root for the more like the person who is more suave and like who's more sophisticated in this versus the person who is like doing this
just
for the
the raw carnal brutality of
yeah,
it all.
yeah. It's like,
But the fact
well,
that the
yeah,
you're still forgetting the suave,
ex-
sophisticated one is just as raw and carnal.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah, I
God, I love it.
just the
That's
veneer.
like,
Yeah,
yeah, that's what the Hannibal series. Did you watch that? The with Mads
I
Mikkelsen?
I watched the first season, but I couldn't come back to it for the second season. We lost our provider, so I was
Oh
never able to.
no. Okay, yeah, because I've
Yeah,
seen
I watched
all of it
yeah,
and I would
I've been trying to track it.
definitely,
I've been trying to
yeah,
track it down. So yeah,
yeah,
it's been on my list for years.
definitely recommend watching all of it. And yeah, it puts a new, you would think that it's like, oh, like whatever, it's just a Hannibal and they're making it more gruesome, but they do add more layers to it that is congruent with the psyche that is Hannibal Lecter. So it's, oh man, it's
Yeah,
just so good. He is just a character that is just
yeah.
ripe for interpretation and layers. And yeah,
Mm.
he's fun.
Yeah, I really debated whether to put him on my list. I had to do it number 10. Just it's like I have so many other slots to fill, but I needed this one in there somewhere. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was my number 10. My number 9 was Misery.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, just the way it goes about between the two of them, because it's 90% of the film you fail to realize it's a two-person play.
Hmm.
And yeah, you get the cutaways to the police officer, yeah, you get a few other static shots with other crowds and stuff,
Hmm.
but 90% of it is the two of them, and they hold it remarkably well.
Yeah, they
And
do.
yeah, and even more to the fact, he's in a bed for all of it. He's propped up in a
Hmm.
chair, he's got his foot on the stool or that footrest, and he's sitting in bed wondering, how am I going to get out of this? And just the way that they play off of each other, just fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. And just like when she goes off and she's like doing her like a cock a doodie, blah, like she's swearing
uh,
but not swearing. It's like, oh my goodness. It's so
yeah,
uncomfortable.
as soon as the first of those, it's like your butt tightens, you get that clench in your fist, it's like he's not safe.
Right.
And
Exactly.
it just it goes from there, and it's like I loved it when I first saw that. And I mean, yeah, it just the tension in that is just fantastic.
Yeah,
And
it's something that like just hitches in your chest. It's like,
yeah,
God, I can't breathe until
I
I
mean,
know that like this
it's
is
like I said,
okay.
it's like like you said, the first time you hear that, and it's like he ain't getting out of this.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, it just ratchets it up, and
Yeah.
I love it for that. So my number 8 was Carrie.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I stuck my kings together.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of this. I do like the other two adaptations. I don't mind the made-for-TV version, and
Hmm.
I don't. I think the 2013 one, the Chloe Grace Moretz one, I do think it gets a little unfairly overlooked, just because the eternal problem. She's too good looking. She's not believable
Yeah.
as I
Yeah.
do get
And
that, and it is a fair flaw in the film,
yeah.
but it's not bad.
No, no,
It's not a bad film when you look past that. That's what I'm
I
trying to say. Yeah.
I also think that I adore Julianne Moore. I adore her. Like, again, like I'm a lover of Silence of the Lambs. I love her as Clarice, but I just don't think she needed to be in that movie as
Yeah,
the mom. Like it's like,
it's an odd role for her.
oh yeah, like I'm like, you're Julianne Moore. Like you could be doing something else. Like we can use somebody else for this role.
Yeah, it's odd. That's my main issue with it is that I think
Yeah.
those two roles I think are way too miscast.
Yeah.
But by and large,
Yeah.
I don't have as many issues with the film as everybody else. But it doesn't top the original.
No, like it's closer to what the novel was, like story
Yeah,
wise. And there are a lot of things in there, like with Carrie going to this like bar, like this house next to a bar and everything. There's so much stuff, but I feel like in that it's, I don't know, it's just there are so many things that it's like I feel like you were going for maybe names rather than actually telling the full story.
yeah,
That it
yeah,
kind of felt a little flat.
yeah. I would want to revisit the 2002 version just because I think it's been a while since I've seen that one.
Hmm.
And I didn't mind it. I thought it was okay. Angela Bettis was good as Carrie. I liked her in that
Yeah.
role.
Hmm.
And I did like the high school girls because I remember a couple of up and coming scream queens were in that one. But yeah, like just the way that Sissy Spacek is in the original. I mean, just she just exudes just that perpetually confused and out of her element
Yeah.
teenager.
She really
And
does. Like that
it,
just innocent of like, why, like
I
I'm
mean,
I'm just doing my best. Like, why can't you just accept me for that? And it's like, oh my God, your heart breaks for
yeah,
her.
yeah, that was the first time I ever remember actually almost like crying but instead of jumping
Oh,
because it was.
yeah.
I mean, you feel for her, and then you get to the prank at the high school, and it's.
Yeah. Yeah, it
I mean,
is. It's very
yeah, I mean
sad.
all of that before I actually like was scared or clenched up, and then the chaos at the prom, and it's just
Yeah, at that
you know
point, it's kind of like, fuck yeah, Carrie.
I mean, yeah, like
Yeah.
I mean the gift that that gift you always see, that good for her thing. I
Exactly. Yeah.
completely
Well,
that
good for her.
exactly.
Yeah.
I didn't know it at the time because gifts weren't a thing back then.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I
That's what,
completely
yeah,
felt it.
exactly. That's what you felt. It's like,
Yeah,
oh man, there are so many things where it's like, oh, maybe you could have thought through that, but good for you overall.
yeah,
Like you took control of it.
yeah. And yeah, I still give it credit for doing that. And so my number 7 is Audition.
Ooh, I haven't read that book.
I from what I recall, the book is faithful to a point. I think it's the switch over from how she acts, and I'm trying to be spoiler free about this.
Yeah.
I think the switch over in the book is handled a little differently. I don't think that she comes off the same way in the book as she does in the movie. Because the
Okay.
movie, they added a couple character quirks that
Hmm.
aren't in the book. And I think the book handles the changeover somewhat differently. But the rest of the film is, I think, pretty faithful from what I remember.
Okay, cool. Because when I was looking up things, I was like, oh yeah, let me get a list and like put my list together. I saw Audition on there and I was like, oh man, I haven't, this is something that I haven't seen the original source material to.
Yeah.
So knowing what you just said, I'm very curious to watch it.
Yeah. I mean, the film is it's still amazing. It's still a lot of fun as is. But like I said, from what I remember of the synopsises of the book, I think they changed her slightly. So the twist is it comes off a little differently, but I think it's one of those where they changed it just for the essence of the character rather than anything specific.
Hmm.
Because I remember Mike was a huge fan of it, and that's one of the reasons why, because it's actually one of the few things where there's a close turnaround between the book and the movie. Because the
Right.
book
Yeah.
is, I think, 96 or 97, and then the movie's 99.
Okay.
So I think it was one of those where Mike he was like, okay, I've got to do this. So
Yeah.
from what I remember, he said he really wanted to keep the essence of the character, but
Hmm.
it was either unfilmable or he couldn't do it. So they made a few slight changes to her. So the change comes a little differently, but I think it's still the same essence of the book from what I remember.
All right, cool.
Yeah. Number six, I have The Haunting.
Yes.
I'm a huge fan
That
of,
that
uh,
was close to being on my list.
yeah. I've always been a huge fan of this. It's one of my small guilty pleasures is haunted house films.
Hmm.
So this one, and for those that are wondering, yes, I'm referring to the original, not the remake.
Yeah.
I
No, God, I would have
yeah,
some words to say.
yeah. I just wanted to make that clear. Be just throwing it out there, but yeah, I do have a lot of love for the original. It's one of my favorites in the genre. I remember reading that there was much more of an overt lesbian relationship between Eleanor and the other girl that was toned down for the movie.
Theo?
Theo, yeah. I remember that
Yeah.
they were much more overtly lesbian, which the censors had to dictate it, but I think otherwise
Yeah.
it's incredibly faithful. And I can understand why they kept it faithful because even with the toned down relationship, they're still great together. I still really appreciate the pairing. And you mix them together in that house. That house is just chilling.
It is. Yeah.
And
I that scene where they're just in their room and you see the doors like
uh
breathing, and then you God, that like I'm holding your hand. It's like I'm not holding your hand. It's like, oh
oh
God.
that got me.
It's so scary.
That got me. Yeah. I'm a huge fan of those kinds of jump scares,
Yeah.
and that got me when I first saw it. So yeah, yeah, I had to keep that on the list. Uh,
Absolutely.
Number five for me is Let the Right One In.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah,
That is a good one.
one of my favorite vampire films of all time. Not my favorite, but it's a top five, much like its placement on this list.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I first learned that she was a vampire because I didn't know she was. When I first heard that turn, it was a gut punch. It was like it completely shocked me because I didn't suspect it. I didn't see it coming. I thought she was a ghost for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
So when she revealed vampire, I was like, wow. And the way it handles the central relationship between the two of them, realizing that they're barely 10-year-old kids.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's fantastic the way it handles
You're
that. And
right.
they're just so tender and heartfelt that it just comes off so naturally and innocent.
Yes. Yeah, that's one that I didn't know either. I didn't know what I was getting into, and when I did, I was like, "Oh my God, this is just it's so sad." Like
Yeah.
the sadness of it
And then
just
that,
carries through, and the love, and like the love of, I will love you through whatever. It's like it's not that romantic love. It's just something that just transcends. And
exactly, yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
such a beautiful story. And I I'm annoyed that there was an American remake like there was for that German what was that German one with the shoot? The
I may help if you know anything else.
the golfers, and they made an American version of it.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, I remember reading about this, but it's not coming to me.
yeah. Um, shoot. What is it? Um, well, anyway,
Yeah,
that one that it's like the German family on vacation, and they have people come over, and they're like, hey, like, let me like take over your family. And it's just, I don't know, it's just,
oh, funny games.
yes, thank you, funny
Funny
games.
games.
Yes,
That's
that
what it was, yeah.
it's something that I like. Funny games I saw, and then I saw this after it, and I was like, man, this is just so like messed up, and it's just, it gets in your head. And I just appreciate a story that can really take these general abstract ideas and use them to get psychologically into your head, like
Yeah.
things that can be like, oh, this is a holiday thing that is, something that should be universally, or at least like culturally acknowledged, yet we're going to use this thing to get into your head about why you're a bad person, and your sins, and your what you should repent and everything. And that feeds into the the flip side of what we're celebrating. It's
Yeah.
it's really fun to dissect. And
Yeah.
it's one of those things where it's like, oh man, like, yeah, like I really, I appreciate like this religious thing, but I really want to dissect it because there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I absolutely love that movie. I mean, I could go on for that for a while. Number four for me is Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like we were saying, just the way it just it attaches one of the greatest relate sensations of a person's life, and then just flips it onto its head into something just so demented and tragic. Ugh.
Yeah, and that's one of the scariest things to me is the because with Rosemary's Baby, like she's a mom, like coming into her own. And as I have gone through this, like you go through that period of like, I have no idea what I'm going through, like I have no idea what I'm doing, but yet I'm the mother of this being, so I know what's best. And it's like this, like, I don't know what's going on, but hey, like, I got this kind of thing.
Yeah,
And I love seeing that in Rosemary's Baby, that just like that give and take of like, oh my God, like pregnancy is scary and I don't know what to do. I don't know what I'm doing, but you know what? I got this. Like, this is what I should be doing. And almost I would say, almost the scariness of how accepting you are of what you need to do when you're a mother. Like, I, I, you just got to do it because you're a mother.
yeah,
You, either you are or you aren't. And if you are, you just got to fucking do what you got to do. And that's what it is. And
yeah,
it's kind of scary actually. Like, yeah, going through it, it's like, wow, what you realize what you would do as a mother to protect and to teach your children how to navigate the world. It's actually scary what you would do for them.
yeah,
And I get that.
yeah. Couldn't have said it better. Of course, you did it better because you actually have firsthand experience. So, my number three is Jaws.
Yes.
Yeah, I know it's not close, but I think the changes are for the better. This is actually one that I am pretty familiar with the original novel, and that would not have lasted if it came on screen as a faithful adaptation. It was not that good. The changes to this one, I think, this is the few times the changes from the book were for the better.
All right. Yeah, I have not read the original version. I've seen the movie many, many a time.
Same here, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I've
Yeah,
always wanted to read
yeah. The
Jaws, but
the
I just
novel
never had time.
the novel makes the shark almost a supporting character,
Hmm.
and it just seems the attack the way that it the way it appears in the novel is much more freak accidents, which I think is partly because of the original inspiration with the attacks on the Jersey Shore in the
Hmm.
early 19 teens. I mean, I can go in depth on that um, at a different time, but the majority of the novel is two alternating storylines. The first is the mayor pressing Brody not to do anything because he's being pressured by the mafia, and they're the ones controlling the town through
Hmm.
secret. I think they're like running a landscaping scene where they like own the property, so they don't want to lose that by the tourists leaving, so they're pressuring the mayor to tell Brody to keep it down.
Hmm.
And then there's the secondary storyline with Hooper and his wife having an affair.
Okay.
So yeah, uh, the book is
Hoopa.
yeah, Quint is pretty similar. I think, yeah, Shaw toned him down a little. He's not as cranky, he's not as salty or any of that.
Mhm.
Different death, which I'm not going to spoil, but um, yeah, the way that the book plays out, it would not have been as good as it is. The movie Jaws wouldn't have been as good. So I
Mm.
absolutely love the movie. I mean, it's one of the best of all time. So had to honor it that way.
Mhm.
Number two is Frankenstein, like we mentioned.
Yeah.
Although mine's the Universal one. I have nothing against the Mary Shelley one, but
Yeah.
I went with the Universal one just because it's my favorite of the two.
I do. I absolutely adore the scene where it's something that wasn't shown in original theatrics, but when he's like, oh my God, now I finally know what it's like to be God, and just like all
Yeah.
of, oh my God, all of that like pontificating and everything. He's just like
Yeah.
it's so good. Mary Shelley was so good.
Yeah. And my number one is The Exorcist.
Nice. Yes. You know what? That would have been on my list, but I have not read the book.
Mm,
Also, okay, I've been listening to this other podcast, Astonishing Legends. If anybody has not heard of it, please go check them out. Astonishing Legends. They do a lot of they talk a lot about I don't want to say famous, but just like
well
things
renowned.
that are, yeah, like they've done the Exorcist story. They've gone to, if anybody knows, the Sally house, they've gone there. They do all these like long podcast episodes on kind of deconstructing what it is to follow these supernatural stories, if that's the best way I can put it. um because they're not trying to prove anything, they're just kind of agnostics, like they want to say something, but they'll give you the ins and outs as it comes. So
Yeah.
they're they have been a something that I have listened to like constantly, and they have a lot of things here and there where it's like, we've been to somewhere where it's like there's a lot of stuff going on, and it might be something that's connected to psychological, or not psychological, paranormal history. And they're really interesting. I would highly suggest checking them out. But they have made me want to go to different places and be like, all right, let me just see where, like, not just to capture something, it's just like, let me
Yeah.
go and see what I can feel as a person who is open to things that are like, I've heard a lot of people talk about a lot of strange things. So let me just go and see, and maybe something will open itself to me, because I'm not opposed to like any kind of paranormal things coming at me, but it's like, all right, let me, also test my boundaries. I don't want
Yeah.
anything awful coming at me, but it's, yeah, like I do, I don't know, it's just kind of that, like, I'm open to things, and like, let me just feel what's out there.
Mm. Yeah. I wish I was like that. From my own personal experience, I would be open to it if I experienced anything, but since I haven't, it's one of those where I don't have that kind of
Yeah,
connection. But
yeah.
knowing one either way for sure, I would be open to it either way. So, but yeah,
So we should go on a like Midwest, like Western, like ghost tour thing, and just like check stuff out. And yeah, like just take stuff with us and like, hey, what happens?
maybe someday, but
Yeah.
yeah, I guess that brings us to the end of our list. Before we go, do we have any honorable mentions to bring up real fast?
I actually do have an honorable mention. I would like to do Coraline as an honorable mention. I That is a beautiful short story. I think it's great for like middle school kids, and my son is 6 right now. 2 years ago, he was really into Coraline, still into it. Like, it's something that my kids watch, and like, they might not be exactly into, but it's one of those things that it's like, oh yeah, it's like this weird thing that's on, and it's like we like it. And uh Coraline is just, I don't know, it's just one of those things, kind of like The Nightmare Before Christmas, where it's just one of those things that kind of seeps into your childhood. And um because Coraline is such a great book, which I would recommend to anybody who, no matter what reading level you're on, like Coraline, amazing. And it's really fun for kids. And watching the movie is just a visual treat. So
Mm.
that's my honorable mention, is Coraline.
Yeah, for me, I have two. Um, I would go Stir of Echoes,
Oh, yes.
which
I want to
is,
do that as a review soon. So if we do, it's all on you. That's my recommendation based on
yeah,
you.
cool. I mean, yeah, it's a great movie and I'm a huge fan of it.
Yeah, and it takes place in Chicago.
Nice. And my other one was Ringu. The
Yeah.
Ringu, that was a one that I don't know if a lot of people are familiar with, but yeah, that's also a novel adaptation. So
Yes. Yeah, it is.
yeah, so yeah, wow, this was so much fun. So glad we got
Yeah,
to do this.
me too. I'm so glad I got to talk to you.
Oh, same here. So before we go ahead and tell everyone about your show, where they can find you, and necessary links if you want.
Well, I am again a co-host on Beyond the Screams podcast. You can find us at beyondthescreams.com and find us at Beyond the Screams on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And yeah, just let us know what you want to hear and what you think.
Awesome. Absolutely. So yeah, links for those will be in the show notes down below. And thank you for listening. Thank you for joining me, Holly. This was a blast once
Yeah,
again.
this was so much fun. Thank you.
My pleasure. Happy to have you on board. And with that, we will see you next time with a new list for you to check out. So stay tuned until then.
Bye.